All across the world, we are live.
It's whopping 2 views.
Where do you get
Actually, last year I started getting a bunch of people watching me in some very interesting places. Like Kuwait and things like that. Huh? Yes.
Where do you get those shirts at?
I made them in my backyard shop. Any other questions?
You have a sweatshirt?
How much are you selling?
Yes, I would sweatshop. People who want to pass, make me shirts. I don't even know where I got this one. I have no idea. Some were gifts, and I don't even know where I got it. Yes. Yes, you can. Who else needs a review list? Okay, here's the thing about the review list. I gotta make sure Harper's Ferry is on this one. It didn't cut off. Good, I'll trade you. Oh, perfect. Well, for that one, just underline the purpose. All right, I'll get this graded and I'll get it all recorded. Why? You got one yesterday.
Oh, God, that's what this is. I put it near my eye.
All right, so let's go ahead and finish this up. On Monday, I'll give you hints about what the test. Not everything will be on that list, and you'll notice one more thing. It goes into chapter 14. So chapter 14, probably up to the election of 1860 will be on there. That's what we're talking about today. But I'm really going to focus on what we get doing in class right now. And then that's next week's schedule. And if you're going to be gone, I do have a short story to give you and a few more things. Or a few people talked about being gone on Tuesday. I have a really good short story by Ambrose Bierce.
Wait.
No, I'm not going to wait.
We have school on Wednesday? No. Yeah.
No, I don't quit. There's no off switch
Oh,
here.
okay, never mind. I was.
That's your Thanksgiving gift at Thanksgiving. Okay. Huh? You want more? But the short story, the book there will be a quiz over that, especially the home front section on Tuesdays. I'll answer any questions on Monday. The math is in that little packet I gave you, and the short story you will like. I promise you will like. The butler did it this morning. All right. Huh? Doughface. All right, so let's go ahead and get busy. What do you have? Walk it over. Don't do that again. Sorry. Yeah, I know you're sorry. All right. So we got right to Nat Turner's Rebellion, didn't we?
Yeah.
So let's go quick. The big thing about Nat Turner's Rebellion is, and why this was such a big deal. There was always slave rebellion, the threat of it. This one they blamed on northern agitators, abolitionists. And that is going to lead to a series of what we call Nat Turner laws. And this is the actual sign of the insurrection. And this is talking about abolitionists. But these Nat Turner laws are what most Americans think of as the slave codes. So they had to wear a slave tag. And it weren't just slaves. Even free blacks had to wear a slave tag. Also, it limited education for slaves. I remember being told in like elementary school and things like that slaves were not allowed to read and write. Well, actually that's not true, but it would be limited after Nat Turner to only your occupation because Nat Turner could read, and the assumption was he was reading abolitionist material and that triggered the rebellion, which of course is garbage. I think his conditions pretty much convinced him how bad slavery was. Also, very much limited the right to assemble, and that's why churches would become even more important. Also, this would be by state, but eventually at the national level, they would censor the mail to make sure abolitionist material would not come out. And yes, you can make the argument that that violated the First Amendment of the Constitution. But they would say that abolitionist material was causing insurrection, and therefore, that's not a measure of free speech. And lastly, a gag rule saying no more talk about slavery in Congress. And they voted themselves to say you can't talk about slavery in Congress for 10 years. Yes.
What was this assemble?
They very much limited how many blacks could assemble in one place at one time. And so the idea is so they couldn't talk about the revolution, and but that made churches even more important. Yeah.
Like censorship, what happened there?
No more abolitionist material now. And yes.
Isn't going through people's mail illegal?
Oh yeah.
And there's everyone's.
Well, yeah. If there's material that they might cause insurrection, technically that's what they use as justification. But it is way to shut abolition itself. But technically, they can do that today. I mean, you can't go do it to someone's no. But yes.
So for education, was it just like limited them or like?
So the idea was for these laws, it would slaves could not be educated unless it directly affected their role, their job. Yes, it still happened. But the whole thing was if they can't read the material, it'll avoid insurrection. Which is, wait a minute, like they won't realize how bad their condition is unless they read about it. And that is why this one's such a big deal, because it's no coincidence. 1831 is really seen as a year that abolitionism really took off in the North. Even though it would always be less than 10% of the population. Oh, before I get to that, these are slave tags. That one's a pretty horrible one, but field worker, even free blacks had to wear this. Yeah, these are the laws that were passed after Nat Turner. They're slave codes. 1831. And 1831 in Virginia, but then all the slave states would do it over the next few years. Yes?
Can you explain the gag rule again?
The gag rule, basically Congress said after this, it kind of fit in with this, no more debate, no more mention of the word slavery on the floor of the U.S. House or the Senate. Which is pretty remarkable, isn't it, where Congress is voting to censor themselves. Now, that went on for over a decade. That should give you an idea just how corrosive this situation was. Okay, so abolitionism really took off in this era. And I put down a couple abolitionists here. William Lloyd Garrison would write his newspaper, The Liberator. And there are a couple things we need to know about his newspaper. Unlike most abolitionists, he believed that the freed slaves should be equal to whites. He was a very radical abolitionist. In fact, he was sympathetic to the women's rights movement. But the other thing about The Liberator that's really important, the first date of the newspaper, 1831, 2 months before Nat Turner. Now, it had nothing to do with Nat Turner, but Southerners said they caused the insurrection. And that was their fear. Northerners would come south and start insurrection. The other man right here is Frederick Douglass, probably the most famous of the abolitionists. And one reason is just simply his history. He was a runaway slave. He wrote his autobiography and used the proceeds to buy his freedom, so he wouldn't have to worry about a slave hunter getting him. In a way, also kind of a slap in the face to his former owners. But an incredibly intelligent man, very articulate, and he really showed all these contradictions. He was part of the household hell. He knew that his father was his master's father. I mean, there's a weird combination of these slave-holding things. I mean, really, it made his life even more complex. A tireless fighter for abolitionists. He knew John Brown, who we'll get to on Monday, and during the Civil War, he did everything he could to use his influence to get the United States to recruit black soldiers. And not just as laborers, but as soldiers. And they would become decisive for the victory of the United States. And then after the Civil War, fought tirelessly for civil rights. And was very disappointed when the United States abandoned equal rights. He also was at Seneca Falls. Remember that, the Women's Rights Convention? He was there. I really like Frederick Douglass. And yes, you can see it there too. He's trying to comb his hair so it's straighter. Showing all the complexities of that life that slavery led. And the American Colonization Society, though, really showed some of the problems of abolitionists. So here we have the abolitionists wanting to get rid of slavery. But most of them were like, but they're not ready to become citizens. We want a white republic. So the American Colonization Society wanted to send them to this place, Monrovia, which is the capital of what country did they create in the 1820s? They created a country in Africa where they would send freed slaves to. It technically had to be voluntary, and they found out that most freed slaves didn't want to go to Africa. They were born in the US. They created Liberia. And that is a pamphlet they would send to freedmen to go to Liberia. And so we don't want the freedmen here. We want them to go to Liberia, so we can be the white republic. They're not equal. And that would be one of the many contradictions of the abolitionists. And you can see this all the way up to the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln still, even well into the war, by 1862, was thinking colonization would be the best path for former slaves. Not equality. Lincoln would change, also very pragmatic, had to win the war, but it showed that the abolition movement was very complex. But to Southerners, they thought they were all William Lord Garrisons or eventually John Browns coming to cut their throat in the middle of the night. And so that is a little bit about slavery, a little bit about abolitionists. And now we have this market economy. That the North wants to spread into the territories. Sorry, I'm Richard. And the system of slavery. What we're coming to is new heading. The fiery 50s. And look at it, look at it. It's red, like fire. Yeah, that's me being a little artistic. You know, I just, sometimes I also call this, the whole thing with the impending crisis. And this 1850s, that's John Brown in the background. We're going to skip right ahead up to here. Because we remember the Wilmot Proviso. Zachary Taylor was elected president. And now we're going to spread the system of slavery into these territories or not. The thing is, we had lots of time and gold was discovered. By the summer of 1849, California wants to be a state. They want to be a free state. Zachary Taylor, nobody knew what he wanted. Everybody, including himself, including him, thought he had lots of time. And so, he came up with a solution that shocked everybody. Here's Taylor. He looks happy. Nobody looks happy in these pictures. At least it doesn't have that frown. If the problem was slavery in the territories, that was the problem that seemed to be pushing the country towards civil war. Let's just skip that step and make them states right away. Sound good? If they're states, problem solved, no civil war. Sound good? They'll be states. But what kind of states? They'll just come in with existing laws. Boom, problem solved. Existing laws? What's he proposing? What he was proposing is this. California and a massive New Mexico would be free states. Because they didn't have slavery. They had no slave codes. Now he thought, problem solved, we can go home now. Who might be a little, just slightly upset by this? And things were changing in the South. They had previous congressmen, Southern politicians, statesmen, compromisers, trying to figure out a way to save the Union and slavery. But more and more, younger congressmen are not going to be like that. They're thinking, if we don't get what we want in the South, then we'll blow the whole thing up. If I don't get what I want, I'll destroy the country. And literally, they were talking about that. It's worth it. It's worth it to save slavery and save our system. They are radicalized over the years of compromise. These guys are going to get the very appropriate name, the Fire Eaters. And the fire eaters, these are the three most prominent ones. Edmund Ruffin of Virginia would actually fire the first shot at Fort Sumter beginning the Civil War. Yancey of Alabama openly talked secession. Mason was not quite as radical, even though he had great hair, but Mason would be an ally to them. And those were pictures that were taken actually during the Civil War. If we don't get slavery in the Mexican Cession, we will secede, and everybody knows, secession means Civil War. We tried nullification, we tried compromise, it's not going to work. We get what we want, or it's war. So we'll drive off the cliff if we have to. Yeah.
So, where are these guys? Like, where'd they come from?
The South.
The South?
Yeah, so these two are from Virginia, he's from Alabama, and I just gave you a few of them, but they were becoming the leaders of this new, more radical political movement. Now, the Northerners will not be as radical, but you notice they have more free soilers, more abolitionists. It's really dividing, and the political parties are being broken up by this. Both the Democrats and the Whigs are literally being torn apart by this issue. And both parties, well, the Whigs didn't make it, the Democrats barely survived. Not really intact, arguably, till the New Deal. Well, a few of the old-time compromisers said, hey, let's just spend that 3630 that was here. Let's split the Mexican Cession. Compromise, right? Fire eaters said, no, we don't want that. That's not enough. And a lot of Northerners said, no, we're free soilers. 3630 was thrown out almost immediately. The reason I mention it here, they tried the same thing right before the Civil War started, right after Lincoln was elected. And the same exact thing would happen to be thrown out. So, eventually what's going to be called, heading of this little section, is a compromise of 1850. And so we already have the Missouri Compromise, and now we have the Compromise of 1850. Yes?
Who was proposing that compromise of the line, John?
It was a number of different, more moderate congressmen. And 3630 had kind of almost like a religious connotation, like the divide that saved the country back in 1820. And so even when the law is repealed, they'll still be talking 3630. Henry Clay, the great compromiser, he's the guy who broke up the Missouri Compromise Bill into parts so it could pass. He did the compromise tariff, the American system, tried to be president many times. He saw it now, because he knows the end is near for him. This will be my legacy. I will save the country with this compromise. Yes?
How did he do all these things and still didn't make it to be a president?
It is amazing. He actually would be the Whig nominee 3 times, or run 3, and try to be another time. Yeah. He was always on the edge, and it was very frustrating to him. Yeah, it's hard to believe how many, what a prominent politician, but that's one thing though. You're a politician for that long, a lot of baggage. Remember that term dark horse? They can come in because they can kind of invent themselves. And that most really was an issue in this election here. The last one we just had. You kind of invent your own. So, what he proposed, what everyone called then the omnibus bill, eventually we called the Compromise of 1850, but omnibus, I don't know if you've ever heard that word, but what it means is all-encompassing. Like today, when the House of Representatives does a budget bill for the whole government, they call it the omnibus budget bill of 2000, whatever, that kind of thing. So this means all-encompassing bill. No, that's okay. And this all-encompassing bill means he's not just going to solve the Mexican Cession, he's going to solve everything. I will do it all. This is my bill to save the country. I'm not exaggerating. That's the way it felt. Isn't that a great picture? Love the grin. How old? He had to be, I want to say like 66 or, yeah. Well, remember the era, black and white and grainy footage, and he has a ghost. Yes.
So what was the compromise?
We'll get to the parts of the bill right now. But it's going to be this huge bill. Well, here's the bill. And you can write these parts down. One part, you're going to leave blanks. We'll come back to it. And then We're right down here, and then we got to tell you a little bit of what happened. It's your war. So here's the bill. First part, California Free State, a state. Put it in like that. Yeah, stop. Don't write this down. His original idea was no slavery in D.C. I put the asterisk here to remind me to tell you, don't write this part down because it's going to change. But you can imagine Southerners were infuriated by this. You don't want slavery in the capital, a southern city, with a legal practice of people having property. Next, this part we do write down. New Mexico and Utah, territories. They're territories. So they'd split New Mexico up and they would have popular sovereignty. Actually, what it said is they would write their own constitutions to avoid that very incendiary words, those very incendiary words, popular sovereignty. So Utah, New Mexico. Next, a tough fugitive slave law. And it said that all citizens must help return runaway slaves. And where this really mattered was New England and New York, where a lot of the runaway slaves had hid. That's actually in the Constitution. The Constitution says that states must return runaway slaves, so this is a law to carry out that constitutional duty. Southern states desperately wanted this. And then the Texas border issue. You know, the huge state of Texas, and the old Texas Republic had all these debts. So what do you do about that? So, if you look at this, it's got all these different components, right? Now, one will change. The problem is this, it won't pass. Northerners don't like parts of it, Southerners don't like parts of it. It will not get through the House or the Senate. And Henry Clay, the great compromiser, won't compromise on this. He won't break up the bill. He won't change anything. He broke it up in 1820. He won't do it here because this is my law and I want to pass that way. He really believed and convinced himself, I am the only one to save the country. And the debate over this going into 1850 became very divisive. Zachary Taylor refused to support this bill. Refused to have anything to do with it. In fact, he's the one who dubbed it the omnibus bill. And pretty soon, both sides divided. Daniel Webster, the old Whig, by then he was old, from Massachusetts, would get up and give one of his most powerful speeches in support of a compromise. Oh, almost forgot something. Gosh, I jumped the gun. Henry Clay knew he didn't have much time. That's part of the reason why he didn't compromise. Because within a year, that's his death mask. What? Think about before photography. Now photography is brand new, but especially before. You want to remember a loved one who passed away. How did you remember their face? Either they do it right before they die, they might make a life mask, but it would be very normal to make a plaster cast of their face right after they die. So you'd have something to remember their face by. Now, if you think about it today, and why they got, eventually don't do it anymore, is photographs, it doesn't make sense. But back then, it was something to hold on to. That was his death mask. And yes, he's got the same grin. What's he thinking? All right. Daniel Webster would give one of his best-known speeches in support of this, where he tried to make it very clear, we can't break down on sections anymore. We have to pass this law to save the country. Thus the great beginning of the speech. I come here not as a Massachusetts man or a Northern man, but as an American. It doesn't quite rhyme, but it's close. Yes, he looks vaguely like an owl in that picture. He was one of the old-time compromisers. He too is near the end. Within a year, he also would. Yes, I have his death mask too. At home, no. They would kind of shade the eyes to give it that look and a few other things, but the hair too was always an issue. But yeah, that's his death mask. And then a senator, same deal, been looking for a way to save the Union from slavery. He wrote a speech against the compromise, and he was so ill they had to tie him on a stretcher and they brought him in, kind of leaned the stretcher back against the podium while Senator Mason of Virginia read his speech. That's how ill he was. So he's kind of propped in this thing, sitting there staring at everybody. Who might that be?
He's still alive?
He
Yes.
never died, actually.
And look at the finger. Look at the finger, everybody.
Why is it so creepy? I'm so.
He's got he's a six-jointed finger. So, Calhoun, yeah, that hair. Now do you see why that's for dress-up day? Wait. What was his solution? We can't have the compromise. What we need, 2 presidents with a veto. A northern president and a southern president.
Every picture of him, he looks like Frankenstein.
And if you have 2 presidents, what would ever get passed? Nothing. Yeah. This is a non-solution, his last desperate attempt, and look at his eyes, everybody. Look at his eyes. No matter where you're at in this room, right? Where is he looking?
Your soul. That's how he stayed alive.
Now, as corrosive and horrible as his philosophy was, he still wanted to save the Union. He was not a fire eater, even though they all adored him. He wanted to save the Union. And he too knew, within a year. What a time, huh?
Please don't show us the map.
First off, that's at the First Episcopalian Church in Charleston, South Carolina. And yeah, I went there and took that picture with on my walking tour, and it is routinely vandalized. It's a very. I want you to imagine.
Was his ghost there?
Huh?
Was his ghost there?
Just
It looks like his middle name is Calhoun, and then his last name is Calhoun.
Is that his middle name was John Caldwell Calhoun. But what was his wife's name again? Do you remember? Fluoride. Now, I want you to imagine something. All right, just imagine with me. It's a really dark night, new moon, so it's pitch black. Maybe a stormy night, so you want there's some lightning, it's kind of scary, right? And it's dark, and you're trying to sleep, and you finally get kind of a fitful sleep. You've all been like that, right? Pitch black, just uncomfortable, all of a sudden you hear a noise, you wake up, and you see this! That is amazing, and that's exactly what you would think it would look like, isn't it?
Yeah, that's worse.
So,
He still looks unhappy.
in fact, things were so bad by the summer of 1850 that Clay went home. He went back to Kentucky convinced, I failed. The country's done. There were open fist fights and pulling out of guns and knives on the floor of Congress. They kind of occupied little groups and refused to talk to each other. It looked like civil war. That summer of 1850, at least June and into July, looked like it might be the last. That is President Taylor. And Taylor is furious. These people are talking civil war. In fact, he even talked about leading troops down to stop secession, to make sure that Santa Fe doesn't go to Texas. I mean, he was ready to go. In fact, at the 4th of July celebration, Congress was in recess. There it is, the 4th of July. Many people thought it might be the last one. Taylor went in his Major General's uniform. You think about it, it's the president. And he went in his uniform, implying, I will lead the army. He was doing a very bad imitation of Andrew Jackson during the nullification crisis. He was no Andrew Jackson. And think about 4th of July in Washington, D.C. The temperature was, yeah, 1,000,000 degrees with the wind chill. Horrifically hot. He stayed for hours for speeches. He gave a talk, went back to the now called the White House, and he had his favorite dessert, chilled cream and berries. Chilled cream is what? Ice cream. This is an actual picture of what he ate right before he dipped a spoon into it. I snapped that right before. How'd they get ice cream in 1850? In summer.
You get your ice and you get your
Where do you get the ice?
north. Really far north.
I'm gonna quick go up to the Yukon, I'll be back tomorrow. Ice houses. So in the winter, they would cut ice from lakes and they would store in basically kind of underground little houses. With insulation so they could keep the ice in there. So they could pull the ice out. And the White House had an ice house. Obviously, very rarely would you use it, but that's how they did it. Well, obviously there's something else wrong with his gastrointestinal system, but he got a stomachache that night. The next morning, he was in agony. Absolute agony. Sounds like it basically his intestine ruptured. So he must have just been, unimaginable pain. Pretty soon he passed out that evening of 5th, and died the 9th. The second president to die in office. I don't have a death mask. And think about this for a second. We have, Congress was in recess, but there were fistfights on the floor of Congress. Henry Clay, one of the most famous politicians in American history, he's back home thinking the country is destroyed. It looks like everything's falling apart, and now the president dies. And immediately there's whispers of perhaps he's, I don't know why I whispered that. But who will say today? Who will step into the breach?
Isn't it replacing Millard?
Millard Fillmore? No, it's Raoul C. Calhoun.
Wait, who?
Raoul C. Calhoun, right there. Neck hair?
That's even more.
Look, wait. Look at the finger.
Why is that even more unsettling than the real one?
Why is that
Dang. I feel like you.
I don't know if he's, yeah, well, I have natural artistic ability. His glasses look very 1850, don't they? That's Raoul C. Calhoun. Or maybe, no, it wasn't really one person stepping in the breach. That's Calhoun. Raoul's made up. I don't know. But President Fillmore. Fillmore, okay, he was not popular. This is really his only moment. He was more open to compromise. And with Clay back home, Fillmore supported a move by a young and upcoming senator from Illinois by the name of Stephen Douglas, the little giant. And every picture of him makes him look even smaller. He was not a very tall man, wasn't just over 5'4", and very ambitious, very intelligent, talented politician. He wanted to be president, and he's making his resume. Yeah.
Wait, so
He's a senator from Illinois. He was in the Senate.
oh, okay.
And so Clay's home, Fillmore's more open to compromise, so Douglas comes up with a solution. And Douglas did what Calhoun did what Clay did back in 1820. Douglas split the compromise up. He split the omnibus bill into 3 parts that could pass. So I asked you to write those parts down. Let's go back and look at those. Because we're not going to, there's just one thing we're going to add. The rest of it, you're just going to maybe add one word to it, and that's it. So here's how it works. First one, California admitted as a free state. And here's the part you got to get down. Not slavery, now just the open slave trade or those slave markets. That's what they abolished. There's still going to be slavery. It's a symbolic move. Basically, it just kind of angered both North and South. But you don't need to know the vote number, but that's in the House. You don't need to know that part. But this part we have to get. What section voted for those two combined? What? Someone said it. Yeah, the North. The North voted for that. It was right behind you. We're outstanding. I couldn't see. The North passed that. Now, that New Mexico and Utah territory, so it's popular sovereignty, but they actually, the law said that we should write their own constitution down the road. So it's going to open up to slavery in the short run. Ironically passed with the same vote as here, but mostly what section voted for this one? That South voted for that one, with just a few northern congressmen. Kind of ironic it would pass with the same vote, isn't it? And then the next part. So that one we already wrote down. These two combined. Fugitive Slave Act, and I'll explain more of that in just a sec. So we already wrote this down, and the Texas border, that passed, mostly Southern. But some Northerners passed this. That's how it passed. North, and the two parts voted for mostly South. Douglas, his reputation would grow dramatically. They passed now, we're going to soon call it the compromise. How did people react? How did they react on the floor of Congress?
Right.
The champagne came out. They celebrated. We saved the Union. Handshakes, hugs. I mean, I'm not kidding. This euphoria would last almost 2 years. We saved the country. Yes.
So it was split into like 5 different ones?
Actually, they split it in 3. These two was one bill. There's 5 main parts, but they include this one in one bill, this is its own separate bill, and this one in one bill. Did it save the Union? So the Union's no more United States? Gosh, that's a shame. It's weird they still require us to take American history.
It just postponed.
I know what you're thinking. It didn't stop Civil War, did it? And it's hard to prove it because it didn't happen in 1850, but you can argue, and I think a correct argument, it saved the Union. If there would have been Civil War in 1850, which looked very likely, the South would have won and the United States would not have been here. The South would have won that. 1861, when the Civil War began, even though the South still had many chances to win, it's much more difficult. Do you remember that transportation revolution stuff? And I showed you the railroads. 1850, there were just a few tracks. In 1860, the whole North was covered with tracks. Industry. The Industrial Revolution exploded the North. Manufacturing exploded. And that industry and railroads would be decisive for the victory of the United States in the Civil War. So, the Compromise of 1850, imperfect, incredibly flawed, did not totally save the country, but it pushed the Civil War back 10 years. That might have, at a horrific cost. So I'm not saying this is a good thing. Yeah, it's worth having a Civil War where maybe as many as 900,000 Americans died. So, now these are open to slavery, and they'll decide down the road, so this is still unorganized. That won't be an issue down the road. Don't worry about it. Utah, they had to get slavery. And so Mormons who were opposed to slavery but were terrified about being part of the United States again would allow for slave codes. And people started having slavery, or having slaves, even though there wasn't a lot of money to buy slaves there. But one thing about that, even though then the Mormons now and their new territorial governor, Brigham Young, allow for slave codes, they even banned plural marriage, so a major change in their religion. Well, they didn't get rid of it, they just got rid of the law, it's complex. They were ready to run away. They were ready. And he sent more people down to Los Angeles, which was nothing more than a mission here, and I mentioned that before. And they were going to stay and be a base in case they had to run away and go to Hawaii or Samoa. And the only reason we mention that is because Los Angeles is a desert. But when they're there, they had to somehow make a living. And when they arrived here, they did an amazing job with irrigation, so they tried to do it here. And while looking for a well, they tapped into an aquifer. You know what an aquifer is? A really deep well. It's called the San Fernando Aquifer. They found this aquifer with all this water. And they began to irrigate that very fertile valley for a number of things, but the biggie were lemon and orange trees, because lemon and oranges were like minting money then. And all of a sudden people started hearing about this. Wow, all this great soil. One of the great ironic twists of history, to make an avenue for escape, the Mormons who went there would be the trigger of a modern Los Angeles. They all started going there. Yes, they would drain the aquifer. You can't drain aquifers. And then eventually how they would become bigger and bigger and start stealing water from various places. Yes, literally stealing it. But now there's 5 million people there, and they live in a desert. How much longer will that go on?
That's not an issue. I don't have to worry about it.
No, nothing to see here. In the next 15 years, it's going to be an issue. Click. So in 1852,
What was New Mexico?
No, that was autocracy, but that means they had to open it up for slaveholders, and then down the road they would decide on the Constitution. Actually, along the Gila River, which is in southern New Mexico, there were some cotton plantations still there. There's a lot of cotton plantation, well, cotton farms, I guess would be a more appropriate term now, in Arizona. Which are kind of like plantation, I think the way labor is done there. In 1852, the euphoria of the compromise would make this kind of a boring election after some really exciting ones. The two candidates you need to know is the Democrat Franklin Pierce. He was another one of those kind of dark horses, compromise candidate. He was a Northerner who supported the South. We had a name for Northerners who support the South. Doughfaces. A doughface is a Northerner that supports the House. The House. The South. And somebody, third period, asked, why do you have Doug H. Face up on the board? And my response was, that's Mr. Face to you. And the whole thing, support the compromise. Support the compromise, support the compromise. The Whigs tried one more time with the general. Third time's not the charm. Old Fuss and Feathers just didn't quite make it. And the Whigs were so divided over this, they were falling apart. Don't worry about writing on the Free Soil Party. The Free Soil Party kind of lost a little bit of their momentum because of the compromise. So this election would be a resounding victory for Pierce. A national victory. If you look at this map, all the blue states went for Pierce. This would be the last national victory for the presidential candidate where they won all the sections until 1932. FDR. And Pierce would turn out to be considered to be one of the worst presidents in American history. When major issues came up, especially around Kansas, he was inept and handled them in a way that kind of trying to support the South but infuriated both sections. Combined with the fact that he already had a drinking problem, and then when his wife passed away, right when he became president, and he never got over that. The grief, he was so grief-stricken that he became literally a raging alcoholic. And so that would just destroy his presidency. He's not the worst president. Many people believe the next president will be the worst. Buchanan was considered to be an absolute nightmare. We'll get to him a little bit later. Isn't that great? Just at a time when we need good leadership, have arguably the worst presidents in history. And, oh, one thing about Pierce, he's the great-great-great-grandfather of former President George W. Bush. His mom, who was First Lady, married to George H.W. Bush, was a Pierce. Old wealth. Yeah, very good. Old money. So, already the things were beginning to happen to show that the euphoria over the compromise was misplaced. Uncle Tom's Cabin came out in 1852 also. And this would become probably the best-selling book of the century. And it's written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. You don't need the dates. I don't even know why I put those in. But Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote this, and it was an abolitionist novel. And even though she had not been south of New York, at least when she wrote it, taking stories from various books, including 12 Years a Slave, she wrote a story about the heroic struggle of slaves fighting against this awful system of slavery, and how one man, one of the greatest heroes of any work of literature in American history, Uncle Tom, was able to get them across the Ohio River to the north to safety. This book went around the world. And it's a good story, but it's hard. Prose from 1852 is hard to read for us today, but huge hit in the north, censored in the south. They would say this will cause civil war. And I'll come back to that term Uncle Tom a little bit later, but the word term from Uncle Tom is going to go from being a hero to, you remember that horrific term about Sambo, remember that? It's going to become synonymous with that, kind of a subservient black. I'll tell you about that one a little bit later. But when Lincoln met her in 1862, when she went to the White House, and Lincoln, who had a very kind of dark, dry sense of humor, which I appreciate, Lincoln said to her, so, oh, you're the little lady who started this whole war.
Wow.
Ha ha ha. Okay, so Southerners were infuriated by this book. Every time it was sold in the North, they saw it as another attempt for slave rebellion. They're coming to cut our throat. And I'm not exaggerating the rhetoric at all. And then we have the issues over the fugitive slave law. Northerners hated the fugitive slave law. And before I explain the personal liberty laws, and this was assigned to warn against bounty hunters coming north to try to find runaway slaves, which is kidnapping people and taking them north and taking them south into slavery. The Fugitive Slave Act said this: every citizen, and that means male in this time, must join in the hunt for runaway slaves. They must. And so, going here to our segregated classroom, so most of the males are here, Georgie over here joining us too. We're all gonna, if I say there's a runaway slave, all of you must join the posse to find that runaway slave. If you don't, you go to jail and are fined. You don't have a choice. And judges will decide whether or not that person is a runaway slave or not. And this is amazing. To pay the administrative cost, if the judge finds them to be a free person, they get $5. If they're found to be a slave, 10. Now the thing was, because there was technically more paperwork if you found them a slave, but doesn't that sound like a bribe? And even though that might not sound like a lot of money today, that was a pretty good hunk of change back then. And it didn't change. Well, Northerners became more and more furious. And by 1852, Northern states started signing or writing personal liberty laws. And these laws said, we don't have to obey the Fugitive Slave Act. You can't make us join a posse. You can't make us hunt down our neighbors and claim their slaves. Fugitive Slave Acts, a federal law, were states. Both free soilers and pro-slavery people would talk about states' rights. We want to do this is for a state freedom issue. They only cared about states if it helped them. In this context, Southerners wanted a strong federal government to crack down on states for the Fugitive Slave Act. Then later on they say, well, we don't want the federal government to tell us we can't have slaves. And so it's all just whatever helps us in that moment. Okay, so tomorrow, I'm not going to be here. I'm taking the day off. I know. I need to recharge. But I have good news for all of you. The weekend is going to go by like that.
No.
Don't say that.
Yeah. Better than I was.
Huh?
Better than I was. I have
Good. So you are better. That's it.
I really
My
like
sister.
your dress. Oh, thank you.
It comes and goes. So I understand.
You're smart.
Let's hope it's short. I understand.
Have a good weekend, everybody. Right when you find work. I know someone went to that store. One in Philadelphia. You know, all that stuff was.
We're so weird.
Yeah.
We were. We had so literally we were.
Dang it, no one's.
Oh, so like what we were doing was there's like a vocab game like carving some kind of clay to do that. Yeah. But the prize is at the end. The team who won would get air guitar solo, and so that's what I did. So. But is every time you so what the prize it was, not like it's in the back that.
Like it's been here really heated.
So that like I put the embryo on it, like that made up.
Oh, you mean like there was a different one?
Yeah.
She did 2 different tilts.
I was sure that the one so I didn't hear that.
You're back for more, Matt!
I was gonna say, because I was like, I swear.
Yeah, because I was like, I'm pretty sure this is like game
When we were grading it, she said, you, did you grade it?
You're a key. All right, who's going next?
What did we even get through this?
We got through, I think, the Battle of Kitty Canoe, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think you
There are holes in my memory, I'm just saying.
Yeah, we went up to the berries.
Okay, so we have Zach, you're up. Zach is, he's, yeah.
Yeah, we got time. We're just anti this.
You know, shingles is kind of scary.
Not for my age.
Why do I have to wait till I'm 60? I know people under. What if I'm over 70? Do I still get a vaccine?
No.